sympathy, bitch.
Let's talk about movies, specifically Hugo and Tangerine. Martin Scorsese and Sean Baker produced films that may seem arguably disconnected, but if you were looking at these films conceptually, you too will be able to identify their many similarities that guide the viewer through a narrative. Through focus on pace, color theory, contrast, composition, blocking, location, lighting, editing, there are so many components we are able to dissect, leading us to our overall idea of the films. We are offered visuals that reflect the characters' realities and surroundings that help us understand why they're the way they are.
Do not apologize for shit, yo.
Shut up and get out of our business, okay?
That's right, rah-rah. You should apologize for taking her to a fucked up hairdresser.
Scorsese and Baker have set the identity of the film not only with characters or dialogue, but with location. Hugo Cabret is in 1930s Paris. Through the quick identity of Paris's Eiffel Tower and the wardrobe of the first people we see, we are already analyzing how the film accurately represents the setting through certain elements. As viewers, we naturally find patterns within a time period and location. We look for familiar qualities. In this case, we see the simple Parisian lifestyle. Wardrobe, modest, golden hues, industrial. The overall aesthetic replicates a home-style feel that we, the viewers, can view as familiar.
Christina Rossetti's her name, after the poet.
Language between films can depict the dialect of neighborhoods.
My heart is like a singing
Dialogue and
bird
blocking is
whose
simply
nest is on a
poetic
water
throughout the
shoot.
film. There is a rhythm to the
like an
movement
apple
between
tree
characters in
whose
each frame.
boughs-
Simple toys have an industrial craft to them, emphasizing craftsmanship that bonds family and friends, values Hugo longs for throughout the film. Even a high interest in mechanical clocks can be thought of the simple lifestyle.
Mary's at 7. Mary's at 7.
Okay.
Tangerine is set in Los Angeles.
Now I gotta
The
deal with
warmth
this
of
bitch over
colors
here.
and gritty edges,
nervous.
but playful color palette. Sean Baker frames and cuts together to expose the unrepresented in what many consider the city of angels.
I cannot take it no more. Bye.
The use of transportation brings us to different neighborhoods, all inhabited by a different community. Transgender prostitute blocks, party rooms, Armenian families and households, but is all brought together when we enter a location everyone can be bonded by, a donut shop. I want to show that Tangerine and Hugo are two great films that accurately portray their own version of Paris and Los Angeles through the representation of the people considered to be at the bottom of the food chain.
All right, that's enough. Let him go. What's going on?
This lady just attacked me.
He owes me fucking money.
Rather than looking at the beaches and Hollywood sign or digesting the Parisian culture through landmarks, we are observing the realities of individual characters and communities. The unrepresented are seen here in their everyday lives, making a living through the scraps of their cities, all while observing the culture and patterns in both worlds. Each world is unique by itself. These are great examples of how the film is reflected through production techniques and design. Scorsese envisions Paris as a whimsical, adventure-filled world that unfolds Hugo's natural abilities and curiosity. Using the technologies of CGI, he enhances and choreographs the movement of each element in the frame. Each path has its own coordinated way of getting from point A to point B. Tangerine's storyline starts with Cindy's search all around the neighborhood to find the girl who slept with her pimp or her fiancé, whatever you pick. West Hollywood, Los Angeles is our setting. The direction of the production is raw. In Baker's case, he was able to produce a film with the intent of bringing the reality of Black transgender prostitutes, showcasing their lives and what they have to put up with. Using this location, the West Coast is known for its radiant sunsets, and Sean Baker was able to interpret the city through the harsh lights and saturated hues that will continue to reflect the intense dynamic of the characters. Setting scenes in a beat-up taxicab, isolated alleyways all continue to represent the casual settings of sex workers. Though it is seen as a familiar area, audiences can continue to understand the ways of these people.
It's whatever you want it to be.
Sean Baker uses the streets as his stage, with architecture, murals, and stores as our backdrops. An urban city like LA is supported by public and private transportation. In our main character situation, we can only accomplish a way of getting around with $1 for the bus or taking the long road of walking. Settings are not only reflected in rooms or specific buildings, but it can also be observed and impacted through the journey of getting there. How did we end up at donut time? The first scene takes us from one location, then all across Los Angeles, block by block, just to bring us back to the place when we first learned about our upcoming events that later resolved our previous situation with Cindy, with Chester, and Rosmick's distant relationship with his family.
Girl, she stopped at the same store you shopped at.
Relationships are complex. As simple and beautiful as Hugo's environment is, it is still mysterious. Full of hidden entryways, dark figures, Hugo's in search of something intangible. Through the craftsmanship and skills brought to him by his father, he looks for solitude and a family. We have a vast amount of clues and pieces to what he is looking for, but as a young orphan, he is seen as detached from the rest of the world after his father's death. Seen as a thief and a liar, Hugo accepts his role while using his skills in mischief to acquire what he needs to be unseen while fulfilling his own sense of wonder and meaning. Gears, metal, and basic materials all come together to show the build of Hugo's character. In a busy train station, we see many materials that are shaped or tinkered with.
Shouldn't I tell Mama Jean?
No. I think it should be a surprise.
Gears for clocks, toys, cinema, and film, they are all part of Hugo and Isabel's adventurous world.
How did you two rats get in here?
Side by side, these films contrast in color. Any viewer can see that a Los Angeles movie is going to show some beautiful warm tones. But why? I think the prominence of LA as a setting stems through Sean Baker. Having the stigma of this city be a wonderland for many people, it's filled with stars, beautiful beaches, Malibu getaways, LA can uphold that look. But Tangerine is different. We don't see an excess amount of materialistic values. Baker's production shows the realness of the streets. What does it take for sex workers to make a living, even if they did just leave prison with $2? Baker uses the location to enhance the story through the relationship and street smarts of Cindy and sex workers. Within Scorsese's production, he unfolds the contrast between Isabel and Hugo. From a cold underground world of clockworkers, blue hues and dark corners seem to suit the empty and cold world Hugo's forced into.
It's broken! Oh, I think broken!
Being alone in the tunnels forces the orphan boy to make his own way of looking into the train station. Simple elements like color and contrast can show us where our characters stand. Our urban spaces are taken in control by several communities. Daily business all of a sudden comes together in familiar settings and behind walls. Each path taken shows how our characters will react, develop, and bond with our other characters. In this sense, location is everything.